All right, well, today we're going to be looking at adding integers. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at adding integers when we have two separate numbers, two separate integers, as well as when we're adding three different integers, as well as when we are adding integers in the form of an algebraic expression. So let's go ahead and get started with the adding of two integers and see how we do, all right? So what exactly does adding integers look like? What is an integer? Well, to know what an integer is, we have to know what a whole number is. And a whole number is something you've been using for quite some time. Whole numbers would include like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 20, 55, 100, 2050, on and on and on. Basically, any number that can be written without a negative sign and without a decimal or a fraction it would be considered a whole number. Now, sometimes fractions can be whole numbers. For example, 6 over 3, 6/3, that is a whole number because it is valued at 2. So those can be, but you get the idea of what a whole number is. So what an integer is it's all whole numbers, like every whole number you've ever learned about, and all of the opposites. We've talked about this before. An odd number, a negative number would be like -6 because again, if I write it, it'd be written as -6. Well, think of that. -6 is the opposite of 6, right? And the negative sign means opposite. So that's what an integer is. An integer is all of the whole numbers, 5, 10, 25, 30, 33, whatever the number may be, and their opposites. -5, -10, -15. Okay? So that is what our integer is. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at how we can combine negative numbers or positive numbers. Now, the positive numbers you've seen before, and we're going to use little counters. So for example, for 3, I'm going to do plus, plus, plus. There's 3 positives. And over here we have plus, 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 plus. We have 4 positives. So when I combine these together, I end up having 7 positive signs, so it equals 7. Now, I know you already knew that, but I wanted to go over how to use these counters. Now, if I have a positive and a negative, that equals 0. They cancel each other out. Just keep that in mind. So I'm going to use red for negatives. I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I use positive will be, we'll say black. It's in the black. So I have 1, 2. So I have 2 negatives, which cancel out 2 positives. And I'm left with 3 negatives. So this equals -3. Or in this case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 negatives. And I have another negative over here, which none of them cancel out, and it gives me a total of 7 negatives. So this would be -7. Now let's take from this a lesson we can use. If I have, we'll go back to the -5 plus -5 plus 2. These are the questions you have to ask yourself whenever you have an addition problem and the signs are different. Okay, signs are different. Do I have a larger negative number or a larger absolute value of the two numbers? So -5 and 2, which one has the larger absolute value? And that'd be -5. So if I do, I'm going to find the difference. So in my head, what I'm doing is I'm taking the absolute value 5, I'm subtracting the other absolute value, which is 2. This gets me 3. So I have 3 as an answer. However, it gets the sign of the bigger absolute value, so it'd be -3. The same thing would work if I have, let's say I have 3 actually I'm going to do 13. 13 plus negative 8. So in this case, the absolute value of 13 is bigger than the absolute value of 8. So I really have 13 minus 8, which gives me 5. Right? And so the bigger absolute value is positive, so my answer is going to be positive as well. Now, if I have two numbers I'm adding that are the same sign, I always just add them and give it the sign of both of those numbers. Okay? Hopefully this makes some sense. We're going to move on to adding three integers. Okay? Three integers. Now, when adding three integers, there's a couple ways of doing this. The way I like to do this is I like to combine like integers first. So I have a -3 and a -5. So I know that -3 plus -5 is -8 plus 4. And now I know that I have 8 negatives and 4 positives. There are more negatives than there are positives. How many more? There's 4 of them. So I get -4. Or as we talked about before, absolute value of 8, or absolute value of -8 is 8. Absolute value of 4 is 4, so 8 minus 4 is 4, and the bigger negative is 8, so it's going to be, the bigger absolute value is -8, so it's going to be a negative. Again, notice what I said in this problem. I said I have 8 negatives and I have 4 positives. What do I have more of? I have more negatives. How many more? I have 4 more. That's another way of looking at it. How about over here? I have -2 plus -10. That gets me -12. And I'm going to add that to the last part, which is +12. -12 plus +12. Well, I have 12 negatives. I have 12 positives. They would all cancel each other out, right? So I would get 0 for my solution. Now I want to go back over to number 4 for a moment. I mentioned there was another way of doing this. You could combine the like signs first, or if you want, you can just go from left to right. I could also say -3 plus 4 is 1 plus -5. And then 1 plus -5 is -4, because I know that I have 4 more negatives than I do positives. That's another way of doing it. So hopefully that made some sense to you. Let's go ahead and look at our last set of problems. Here we're going to use algebraic expressions. We're going to use algebraic expressions with our integers and see what happens. Okay. All right. The directions read: evaluate the expression. It should say when a equals 3, b equals -5, and c equals -6. So what we're going to do here is, you'll notice for number 6 over here, we have b plus c. So I'm going to write down the value of b, which is -5, plus the value of c, which is -6. And -5 plus -6, they're both the same sign, so I just add them and keep the sign, so it's going to be -11. That's all I do there. Now 7 is a little bit more complicated because we have absolute value signs. So I have absolute value b plus a. So b is -5 plus a is 3. So I'm going to add what's inside the absolute value signs. -5 plus 3 is -2. Now, I just have to find the absolute value of -2, which would tell me it's how far away from 0? It's 2 away from 0. So the answer here is 2. Our final one, it's the most complicated of all, at least of these three, right? So we have negative, and then whatever c is, plus negative, and then whatever a is, right? So c is -6, and a is +3. So now I'm going to update this a little bit. The opposite of -6 is +6. The opposite of 3 is -3. When I add these two together, I have 6 positives and 3 negatives. There are 3 more positives than negatives, so my answer is +3. So there you go. That is how we add integers in the different scenarios that we had gone through. Hopefully this made some sense to you. As always, please make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that little bell if you want to receive notifications anytime I have a new video that's being made. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye-bye.